Kevin Estela is the lead survival instructor for Fieldcraft Survival. A lifelong outdoorsman with over 2 decades of teaching in the great outdoors, Kevin is well versed in bushcraft and survival skills. Kevin is the former lead survival instructor of the Wilderness Learning Center under the late Marty Simon. He is also the author of the best-selling book, 101 Skills You Need to Survive in the Woods, with over 150 published magazine titles as well. He regularly hones his capabilities in different environments around the globe, including Arctic, desert, and jungle, with the most emphasis in the northern forest. He joined Fieldcraft after 14 years of teaching public high school history. Rounding out Kevin's background is extensive training in Filipino martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and a completion of numerous pistol, shotgun, carbine, and precision scoped rifle courses. A student for life, Kevin is constantly pursuing more knowledge and experience to impart on his students. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm joined today by my very special guest, Fieldcraft survival instructor and outdoor survival expert, Kevin Estela. How you doing today, Kevin?
Pretty good, although I do shy away from using that term expert. I always say I'm a lifelong student, and I'll never, make anything. I'll never become an expert in anything. I just like being a student and sharing what I know. So I'm doing okay.
That's great. Well, yeah, that means you're never hitting that final bit. You're always striving for more, right?
Yeah, because people who kind of rest on their laurels and they say I'm an expert or I've accomplished this or that. It's like you're no better than the high school quarterback from 20 years ago that's still wearing the Letterman jacket. It's like you should be trying to constantly, improve yourself and never peak.
That's right. Otherwise, you're going to end up selling shoes in a mall like Al Bundy, right?
Al Bundy supported a family and did really well as a shoe salesman. At this point, I would totally be fine living in that house. And what was her name? Katie Seagal was beautiful. So he did okay for himself.
That's true. That's true. Well, I want to start with you kind of telling us a little bit about Fieldcraft Survival and what your role is with that team these days.
All right. So I recently moved to our training division, and that's really what I want to make the focus on this podcast. I've talked about the company in the past. We do firearms training and mobility training and all that. But over in North Carolina, we really are setting the standard at our company for the highest quality training. You've got Kevin Owens, who, he won the international sniper competition. He worked at Force Mod. He's basically one of the guys that developed the 1-to-6 variable power optic for the military. Brought the 6.5 Creedmoor on board. The guy is a legend when it comes to long range shooting. I'm over there. I'm a decent guy when it comes to teaching outdoor survival skills. My book is over your shoulder.
Yep.
I've been in the business quite some time, and I bring a lot of enthusiasm to teaching land nav and, the survival skills. And, I get to every once in a while jump into the marksmanship game or the personal security game, sharing some of the self-defense stuff that I've picked up over the years, doing that on the side. And then we have a whole bunch of different trainers. We've got Doc Mack, who is an Irish doctor and PhD who teaches our austere med class. We've got my good buddy Jerry Young. Jerry is a retired Bethlehem, New York detective, fire investigator, SWAT guy who is kind of our multi-tool at the company. He teaches med and survival and a little bit of everything. We've got Kevin's wife, Tula, who does all of our media. My man, John, who, does all of our social media stuff too. We've got a really cool crew over at North Carolina. And, in addition to doing the training, we do put out podcasts. I'm the host of the Fieldcraft Survival podcast. Kevin Owens has his own podcast. Glover obviously has a podcast. We got a bunch of folks that work with us that are all putting out really, really good work. And, in addition to the media and the training, we got, a handful of products you guys might want to check out too.
So what all courses are you an instructor for? And kind of what is your role now in the North Carolina branch?
So anything survival related, I'm going to, put my name on. The 2-day survival class, the civilian survival school, knots, cordage, and lashings, where we spend a whole morning going over about 40 to 50 different ways you can tie cord together. You can make cordage. You can do a lot with it, weaponize it even if you want to. The land navigation, that's really one of my babies. I love teaching land nav. And in North Carolina, I have way more flexibility than I did in Utah to bring out new courses. So we're doing a survival and defensive shotgun course that we've taught in the past. We will eventually do a hunter safety course, which is very practical.
Sure.
Personally, I think a lot of the bubble has burst when it comes to like the cool guy tactical training. And it's like, let's get back to basics. Let's do the stuff that, this country was founded on, which is simple marksmanship and understanding how to do these skills that anyone in the frontiers could do years and years ago. So in North Carolina, those are really like my strong points. But as I mentioned, I do get tapped for personal security where I get to be the role player wearing the padded suit and I get my ass kicked. But it's fun because you learn the bad guy reps, right?
Yeah.
Like I freaked out a lot of people when I did the carjacking scenario because they're like, damn, I didn't know you had that in you. But I mean, my lineage is training with like Bill Rapier, Kyle DeFore, all the SIAC tactical guys. I'm a SIAC instructor myself. And before I joined Fieldcraft, that's where I came from. So when the first time I did the carjacking scenario and I got the bad guy rep, everyone was like, damn, like you were just straight up gangster. And I'm like, that's how I would do it. If I had to jack a car, that's how I would do it. And I mean, at some point I can't completely control the scenario. I got to give them an opening. But at one point, everyone was like, that was scary. So yeah, we have a good time here. And, obviously we can make light of a scenario without taking it lightly. And we do add a lot of humor into our courses and we want people to have a great time. So they come back and they continue to train with us and hopefully share what they learned with people and their family and their close inner circle.
Well, speaking of family and sharing with that, I know that kind of your family had a lot of survival necessities in the Philippines with your grandfather and your father growing up. And when the Japanese Imperial Army came in through 1941, and it wasn't just skills to learn, it was skills to survive and really be able to stay alive, stay out of the Japanese imprisonment. And those skills kind of came down through your lineage and something that you learned from. Can you take me back to kind of how that was something that you eventually learned about because of your family having to go through some of those events?
Yeah, so just like every little boy who grows up with an awesome dad, right? You want to know more about your dad. You want to know more about, how did you live? What were you like when you were my age? So as a little kid, my dad's telling me, "Oh, when I was your age, I didn't buy toys. I had to make them." I'm like, "That's odd." And then that eventually led into the story of like, okay, well, at 2 years old, my father moved us into the jungle, and we lived there from when I was 2 to about 5.5, 6 years old. And I'm like, tell me more, and then my dad would, be great with a pen and paper or pencil and paper and sketch out all the different stuff that he would use and make in the jungle and live in a cave, or what they did to live in the cave. So as a little kid, I was just inspired by that. But that history was that my grandfather was very political. He was very outspoken, kind of like me, very outspoken, and he made some enemies just by being pro-America in a time when the Japanese are now invading.
Sure.
So my grandfather moved the town into the jungle and they lived there. So they did have to do a practical bug out. We've heard people say my get home bag or my bug out bag. Well, imagine bugging out from January of 41 to roughly August of 45. What do you take with you to survive other than skill set, knowledge of local, plants and animals and skill sets like fishing and hunting, foraging and whatnot. I mean, at one point, my father almost died of whooping cough at a very, very young age. And the only remedy they had were edible medicinal plants. So, I mean, that was just totally, totally awe inspiring at a young age. And it never escaped me. So as I got older, and obviously, I become more and more aware of survival manuals and, timeless survival manuals. I start reading up on it. I'm like, this is really cool. And it just eventually led to doing more hikes and camping and fishing and hunting and everything. And eventually here I am today.
Well, talk to me about I know that you at one point in time were a high school history teacher and you did that for, I think, like 14 years or so. And then you then started working with one of your former mentors, Marty Simon, with the Wilderness Learning School. And I also want you to tell me the story about how you became the instructor, because I think that's pretty, interesting one there too. And just how did that transition go from kind of in I guess your timeline of being a teacher and then going into the outdoor instruction?
The way that I can describe that is that there were two timelines that were taking place at the same time. There was my timeline as a professional educator in a public school system, which, don't get me wrong, for the time that I was there, I really enjoyed it
Mhm.
for the most part up until the very end. I loved the interactions with kids. I loved, getting letters from parents or having parents coming in and hugging me in tears saying, you were the first positive male role model for my daughter, because of her father. I'm like, it's an emotional overload. So I value that time, and I have the utmost respect for people who were like me. They went in there, and I mean, any of the nonsense that you're hearing about in public schools right now, it's more administration and board of ed problem than it is teacher problem. And
Right.
many of the teachers, their feet are held to the fire. So, of course, there's going to be the whack job teacher, right and left. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
But the vast majority of the problems are not at the teacher level; it's higher up.
Yep.
So around the same time that I started working as a high school history teacher, I started in August of 2006. I became, or I was a student at the Wilderness Learning Center in August of 2006. Now, I wanted to take and formalize my education in the great outdoors, and I went to Maine Primitive Skills School, Jack Mountain Bushcraft, but I eventually found Marty's School, the Wilderness Learning Center. And the way it worked out was that I would teach at the high school, and then anytime that there was a break, Columbus Day weekend, Martin Luther King weekend, Memorial Day, Labor Day, I was always up at the Wilderness Learning Center honing the skill sets. And that whole next year, when Marty and his wife and all of our friends would plan themed trips, he was testing me. And he would say, well, what plant is that? And I would tell him, oh, that one is milkweed. What part is edible? Well, early on you can eat the early shoots. It's called poor man's asparagus, and later on you can have the seed pods. He would test me constantly. Hey, what's this? Oh, that's horsehoof fungus. It's called amadou. What can you do with it? Oh, you can make a fire starter out of it. And then we'd spend 2 or 3 hours trying to use flint and steel to catch a spark on this thing. And he liked that doggedness. He liked that, you know, I wasn't just someone who could talk the talk, I could walk the walk. And he also appreciated the fact that I could do it the hard way, and I never would bitch or moan. And he loved that. He's like, this is my guy. So the following year, 2007, I go up to I was going to take the advanced class with him, and he already knew what I was capable of, but he wanted me to formalize it. So he's like, come up for the basic class. I'm like, Marty, I already took the basic class. He goes, no, I need you up there. So I get up there, and they're doing interviews, and or not interviews, but introductions. And next thing you know, he goes, and by the way, that's Kevin. He's my new instructor. He goes, teach something. And the first lesson I taught was slingshots, right? How to be accurate with a slingshot. And next thing you know, I was up there from 2007. It was like a week on, a week off, or 2 weeks on at a time, and then a week off and 2 weeks on a time. And I did that from 2007 to 2012, just teaching in the summer and then going back to the high school teaching in the fall. So again, the timelines were running very much parallel. Um, but I always found it strange because, here I was in the summer doing stuff where I was using knives and showing people, basic survival marksmanship with 22s and talking about being uh, ready. And the whole time I'm also studying in Filipino martial arts. So it's like I'm getting more and more capable. But then I found that I felt like at the school, I couldn't really be myself because I would get in trouble for speaking my mind. I would say
Sure.
something, people would be like, "Oh, you're being too forward." I'm like, "But I'm being honest." And there were times where I was brought to. I sound like a kid. I was brought to the principal's office, and I never got in trouble for it, but I was talked to. It's like, granted, I might have called out this kid or that kid, but then those kids would come in, shake my hand, and say, "I'm very sorry that I disappointed you," and then the problem would be over. And the old school ways of teaching and being respectful and earning my trust, like old school ways are being replaced now with a culture in the schools of tolerance for misbehavior. It's like, no, you got to nip that in the bud.
Yep.
So I knew my time was limited at the high school. And when I got the opportunity to join Fieldcraft, I was like, you know what? Uh, Never be afraid to walk away from a bad deal, or never be afraid to walk away from something that doesn't make you happy. And I was like, I know I'm capable. I'm going to succeed at Fieldcraft. I'm leaving teaching, and it was a breath of fresh air.
It sounds it. I mean, I was curious too, like how is it that you kind of started to get in touch with the guys from Fieldcraft Survival, what was that transitional point where they brought you on eventually as an instructor there?
So my book came out in April of 2018. I'm sorry, 2019, April of 2019. And that year I was on multiple podcasts, interviews, had magazine articles written about the book. And that fall I got a call from George Bell, who was working at Fieldcraft at the time. And George was like, "Hey, Mike wants to do a podcast with you. Would you be able to do it?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Well, I didn't realize that at the time Mike had read my book and he told his, then girlfriend, "This is the guy. This is the guy who understands modern survival. He uses guns. He's not some crazy hippie, who is being unrealistic with what capability is. He's our guy." So I was on a podcast with Mike, talked for about 90 minutes, got off the podcast, talked for another 90 minutes, stayed in touch with him. And in June of the following year, I got the message, "Hey, what if we were to offer you this, this, this? You got to move out to Utah, though." And I said, "Okay, that's it." So I went out there in August of that year. I taught one class with the company just to make sure it was a good fit. Met up with Kevin Owens. And I always say that Kevin Owens is the reason why I joined the company, because Kevin and I just clicked. We're both no BS, big boy rules. If you get the work done, great. We care more about making people more capable than us being in the spotlight. Like, if the skills are the star of the show, that's the way to go. So right. Kevin is right there. He's talking me up. He's like, "You really need to join this company. You can really affect a lot of people." Next thing you know, I'm like, "Well, I'll start year 15 as a teacher. I'll get through this year and I'll join the company in June the following year." Well, it went really crazy that fall. And that's when I said, "I'm out." So October 30th is when I left teaching. Next week, I was fishing in New York as kind of like a little bit of a breather. And then the following week, I was in Utah looking for a place to live.
Wow. Where were you before you went to Utah? Where were you teaching at that time?
So I was teaching at Bristol Central High School in Bristol, Connecticut.
Yep.
If you guys follow any college basketball, our center that we had, Donovan Klingon, cool kid, nicest kid in the world. He's currently at UConn, and he's like 7'2". He's probably still growing. He's probably like 9 feet tall. So I was teaching there, and I was living in Farmington, Connecticut. And then I moved out to Utah, and I lived there for 2 years. And now I'm down here only 3 miles away from Fieldcraft East in North Carolina.
Oh, right on, man. I spent a lot of time up in New England. I went to school up in Boston, and I taught in the inner cities for a little while, English in high school, and just love that area. Spent a lot of time in Connecticut too, man. It's a great place to kind of be out in the wilderness, man. It's a wonderful spot. And North Carolina as well, man. I can't wait to come out and visit y'all out there and check that out. I wanted to return back to your book. Just for those who don't know, it's called 101 Skills You Need to Survive in the Woods, the most effective wilderness know-how on fire making, knife work, navigation, shelter, food, and more. I wanted to know, every author that I have on here, I'd like to talk about the process of putting that book, what you put together, the timeline of like from the idea stage to that publication. I mean, I know that I spent 2 years working on a book and another 3 on a different one that I did. And it's a long process. And obviously all these skill sets you kind of broke it down into 10 sections. You got fire skills, shelter, knife, cordage, elimination, navigation, signaling, communication, first aid, trauma, water, and food gathering skills. And so you have kind of a list of about 10 on average of each one of those, making up the 101. And I was just kind of curious about, how you collectively honed in on those and what that timeline was of working on that book.
Okay, so I'll start with the process. To understand the process, you have to understand, before I wrote the book, I was already established as a magazine writer. For the past before the book came out, for the first few years of me writing magazine articles, I was writing 20 to 30 a year, and these were all 2,000 word articles, 1,500 word articles. So I already had my feet wet writing magazine articles, and it was inevitable that a book was coming. My late mentor, Pamana Tuan Kursayak, told me in 2012, he goes, "When's your book?" Or he asked me, he's like, "When's your book coming out?" And I was like, "I'm not writing a book." He goes, "No, you're ready." He's like, "You need to write a book." And that always kind of stuck in my head. We were in his kitchen in Florida. And I remember there were Wawa sandwiches in front of us. Like, I just remember these details. And anyone that's been in that kitchen knows that we always had Wawa sandwiches there. So I kind of just put on the back burner. I just kept writing magazine articles, just getting better. And next thing you know, my buddy Craig Caudill, Nature Reliance School guy, he says to me, he goes, "Hey, you should write a book." I'm like, okay, this is now how many people have told me to write a book. All right, let's do it. He gets me in touch with his publisher, which is Page Street Publications.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Hey, put together a table of contents for us." So I put together a table of contents, and they're like, "We need a sample chapter." So I wrote them a sample chapter. I wrote the hardest chapter first, which was land nav, because it's the most technical out of all of those. I then had a meeting with them in April. And in April of that year, they're like, "Okay, here's your timeline. You're a magazine writer. You write a lot. We think you could probably get this done relatively quickly. Could you get it done in 3 months?" And I said, "Yes, 100%. I didn't want to extend that deadline because the plan was to release it in April, and my birthday's in April. So I was like, I want it out in April. That's my birthday present to myself. I want that book done, and I was not going to fail. So I looked at, what am I going to cover in this book? Table of contents, I had it figured out. And the table of contents came up because in survival, you hear about the 10 essential items,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everyone says 10 essential items or 5 this or 10 that. And that drives me nuts because, when I think of like, okay, 10 essential items, I don't think of having one knife because that's foolish. You should always have a backup, right? And you should always carry the right tools to get the job done, right? You don't see a mechanic showing up to work on an engine with one socket wrench and one size, fitting.
Yeah. It's like the 2 is 1, 1 is none idea, right?
Yeah. So I said, all right, I'm going to write about skill sets, and I want the skill sets to be the star of the show. I don't want gear to be the show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to be what the focus is. I'm going to write about skills. And over time, skills will stay the same, but gear will change, right? And you'll see more change in gear than you will in the skill sets, right? I mean, the foundation of fire is always going to be the same. So I wrote that as my concept. I was like 101 skills, but let me look at what the 10 essential items or 10 essential needs are. So you have knives. Well, can I write 10 skills about knives? 100%. Can I write 10 skills about making a shelter? Yes. And I said, that's it. I'm going to focus. I'm going to use the 10 commonly understood needs, right? Cutting tools, illumination, and I'm going to build skill sets around them. And that's what drove the book. But believe it or not, even though the book is heavily skills based, the most feedback I get is on the mindset component, which I've had people reach out to me and say, "You know what, this is what is helping me get through the day. I haven't been able to figure out what my worth was until I read this." And just like I used to get the feedback from those parents at parent conference meetings, getting that feedback now from my readers is really, really affirming, to say like, damn, I did something okay with this book. So the process was dogged. I would wake up at 5 a.m. and write till about 6:37, and then jump in the shower and go to work. Get home and then write from 3 o'clock until 7 at night. But I got it done, and I basically said I'm going to do one chapter a week, and that's what I did. So roughly 5,000 to 10,000 words a chapter for 10 weeks straight. In a couple weeks, I was able to crank out a couple more, and then that built in time for editing and revising. And then the photos were probably the hardest part because I had to make sure that the photos were right. Once the book was done, in my opinion, the initial first draft, the publishers were like, "We have to cut a third," and my heart just sank because, I mean, you think about it. I love you. What do you cut out? Right? Love you doesn't sound the same. I love what? How many 3-word sentences are there where you take one out and it sounds like shit? So I was like, all right. So I went from 100,000 words down to about 80, and I told them, I'm like, we cannot cut anymore. And they said, all right, we'll get you to 208 pages. I think the book was originally supposed to be 192. And they're like, we will have to limit the number of photos. And I said to myself, I'm like, all right, I'm looking at all my old classic books, and some of them, the classic books that stood the test of time, had line drawings, and it was often one line drawing for a whole chapter, and they're still talked about. I was like, my words are more important than the photos. And that was a compromise I had to make. And I've gotten some grief from it. Some people aren't happy because there's not a million photos. I mean, these people probably eat glue. But you're not going to make everyone happy, and I'm okay with that. I
Right.
know the people that appreciate actually reading and that will listen and they'll absorb the words that are being said will understand why it was done that way.
Well, you talk about, a lot of the response you got back was about that mindset of what you teach in that book. For those who just maybe have a brief, reading of it and just kind of maybe just get into a little bit of, the reviews about it and stuff too, they might not understand that the mindset and what it is you're teaching there. So if you could maybe kind of focus in on that a little bit and talk about that aspect of it and, how that's been something that's gotten you a lot of accolades in that realm.
Well, if you think about it, the mindset really comes from the teachings of three people in my life: my dad, Marty, and Chris Sayak, right? So let's start with my dad. My dad taught me so much as a little kid. Be a student for life. Not to give any spoilers away, but my book ends the way it ends because of the way that my dad taught me. It's like it's always a continuation, right? My dad always taught me to be that student for life, never stop learning. So that component is in there. Every chapter ends with training modifiers. Oh, you're able to get a fire, now do it faster, or do it and get a better result, right? Everything can be done better. I mean, go figure, right? An Asian is going to tell you can always do it better. It's kind of like that Navy SEAL who's the astronaut, the doctor, and the SEAL. And the joke is the mom says, "Is that all?" So now the other thing is Marty, right? Marty, the motto at the Wilderness Learning Center was always prepared, prepared always. And he was a believer that with a baseline of skill sets, you can maybe not be prepared for everything, but you'll be pretty darn ready to deal with it and have a 90% solution at least, right? And Marty had so many truisms that he would say in his courses that I threw in that book, and all credit to him. And then probably the most prominent mindset in that book or teaching is the feeder mindset, which is from SIOC. And in SIOC, we talk about feeders being people that make things happen and they're proactive and they don't wait for things to happen. They get things done, right? So you can think of some serious feeders throughout history. Christopher Columbus, feeder, right? Martin Luther King, feeder, right? He's going after people who are telling him, "Oh no, you can't have civil rights." I disagree. You know what I mean? Like there are feeders throughout history. Well, in survival, so many books are written from victim mentality. And that's not the feeder mentality. So many books are like, if you don't do this, you're going to die. And it's like, how about if I teach you ways that you can survive? It's going to make your life better. Oh, wow, that's a breath of fresh air, So the feeder mindset is what separates my book from a lot of the other books. I'm not going to sell you skill sets by exploiting your fear. I'm going to make you stronger by saying, I can do this. I can do this a little bit better. And every day you slightly get better. And in that feeder mindset, what really stands out, and I teach this at Fieldcraft, is the readiness formula, SIOC readiness formula: awareness, preparedness, and willingness. And that's all part of a mindset, right? Every single day, how do you start your day off, right? Are you starting it with an awareness that you have an opportunity to do great things, or are you going to start your day off feeling like, man, the whole world sucks? Well, if you start off your day the wrong way, it puts you on the wrong trajectory.
Right.
As far as mindset, where do you lay out your gear? We talk about everyday carry. Well, my gear is laid out in the same spot every single day. I put it into my pockets in the same spots every single day. And that's all part of mindset, right? Having a formula, having a system. And then the willingness. People are like, oh, you actually carry all that stuff? Yes, I do. Why? Because I'm willing to be prepared. I'm willing to carry additional items in my pocket and maybe not have the most say like empty pockets, but I know that I have capability. I have a flashlight in one, I have a Swiss Army knife in another, I've got a spare mag for my pistol in another, I've got things on my belt that will let me protect the people that I care the most about. Guess what? I am willing to do that. So that's really the mindset component. That's what sets mine apart. And people who aren't even training in SIOC are like, what is this feeder thing? I'm like, keep reading. You're going to find out. And at the end, people are like, where can I train? And I'm like, look, I never meant that book to be, the sales pitch for SIOC, but a lot of people have joined because they read it. They're like, this system, what I cover in the book is the tip of the iceberg. And to this day, having gone through multiple grad schools, having accomplished a lot of things, I'll say that SIOC training is one of the most important accomplishments of my life, continuing to be a part of that tribe.
That's incredible. And I fully agree. For those who may not know, can you kind of, rewind back and talk about what PSYOPs are and, how that, that kind of relates to what we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I brought some props.
All right.
So
I got some
most people, and I'll put this over on the side. So most people know this tomahawk from the Jack Carr series, right? And a lot of people say, "Oh my God, that thing looks vicious and whatnot." Well, SIOC, spelled SAYOC, SIOC R&D is the name of this tomahawk. R&D stands for Raphael and Daniel, Raphael Kyanan and Daniel Winkler. Now, Tuan Raff is one of our master level instructors in the system. He designed this in the late 2000s, and it's based off of a head axe from the Philippines. So if you look at the Igorot axes of the northern tribes that lived in the mountains, they were using axes in warfare, and they had a front spike. Now, this is the first front spike tomahawk that came on the market. It's the SIOC R&D, and a lot of people think that it's just a knife design, but SIOC is a family-based martial arts system. It's a martial culture from the Philippines, and it is really all the tribal skill sets that have been adopted from the modern battlefield. So if you look at, say, conquistador armor, right, the breastplate, and you think of like if you were a tribesman in the Philippines and you had to fight off a guy in a breastplate, how do you exploit that breastplate, the openings that get to vital targets? Well, SIOC teaches that not against a steel breastplate, but maybe one that's made out of Kevlar or a chest rig worn by a terrorist overseas, right? So it's a modern adaptation of tribal skills and knowledge that's been passed down over the years. And we don't want to be the martial arts school on the corner with the van parked outside saying a month membership and a free gi, just for showing up. Like, we protect our ranks, we protect who teaches it, we protect what is being taught, because it is very valuable, right? It's a family system, and you don't invite anyone to the family table. You got to be welcomed in. So SIOC is blade work, stick work, flexible weapons. We have a firearms curriculum. There is a ground curriculum. There's a stick grappling curriculum. I mean, it's a total system. And as someone who, I'm also a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'll tell you, with that grappling background, or even, my friends who are brown and black belts, I could put a blade in someone's hand who's a novice, and it will make a grappler afraid. And it's really, really a great system for someone who is looking to improve their life, make themselves safer while making themselves more dangerous at the same time, and really kind of rounding out this picture of, the modern Minuteman, or rounding out this picture of someone who wants to be, the gunfighter or whatever. How about we just call it fighter? Like, you're cool because you got a gun, but how about with a stick? How about with your fists? How about, with blades? SIOC complements everything.
When did you first learn about and start practicing that?
I first learned about SIOC with the movie The Hunted, which features Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones. That was the first time it was on the big screen. And actually, the guy who designed this tomahawk is in the movie. He's the one that Benicio del Toro walks up on and, does the sentry removal, right, when he pulls the sling and drops him to the ground. Tuan Raff, since then, has done a lot of choreography for Hollywood. He's done movies with Liam Neeson. He's done stuff with NCISLA, the show Quantico. I mean, SIOC is slowly starting to get out there, and we've got some folks in our ranks who are Hollywood guys. But I learned about it in about 2003, 2004. I didn't start training it until September of 2007, and I've been training it nonstop ever since. So technically, my rank right now is an associate level 6 instructor. My title, in Kung Fu, you'll hear people being referred to as Sifu. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you'll hear people refer to as professor. In SIOC, our technical title is guru, so Guro, so guru, Kevin. And like I said, I love the system. I love training it. It's improved everything in my survival game, all the teaching formulas, and if I can teach people how to use a knife for bushcraft and woodcraft, it's kind of cool knowing that I can also show them how to use it to defend their life.
Do you have some defensive knife courses that you've taught and that are part of the Fieldcraft Survival in training curriculum at the moment?
So I will not cross those streams.
Okay.
Fieldcraft is survival skills training, and
Yep.
I will show people some basics. Like I can show someone a very basic Filipino martial arts blade work, pattern of cutting, but it's not going to be SIOC. For someone to train with me in SIOC, they have to join the system. I've got to vet them. I've turned away people who, if you come to me and you say, hey, I want to learn how to kill someone with a knife, guess what? You're not going to be trained by me.
Right.
I can point you down the street to another school.
Right.
But if someone says, hey, I carry this, I'm going in the line of duty, and they come to me and they're very humble and they understand that there's a process to it. In SIOC, we're always tested, and you will not last long in the system if you're out just for money. Right? You'll not last long in the system if you are watering down the system. Right? I'm not going to teach someone something that looks flashy that is not functional. So Fieldcraft, I know Mike wants to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's never approached me about doing Filipino martial arts. I refuse to do it. And I would actually say that I would, if Mike said, well, you either have to teach Filipino martial arts or I'm going to fire you. I'm going to say you can fire me. That's how strongly I feel, because the interesting connection with myself and SIOC is that my dad, who is a physician, when he was in the Philippines, he was an intern under Dr. SIOC. So I didn't realize this connection until my dad met Chris SIOC in about 2011, 2012. And I found out that our families have been tied for almost 100 years. And we might have drifted apart, but now we're back together, and I will be loyal to that system to the day I die.
Well, and you keep the integrity in that based on it and not having that crossover, using it for any kind of financial or, kind of commercial gain. And I think it's important. And we see people doing that way too often. Right. And it kind of, like you said, it kind of waters down that idea and it kind of takes a lot away from it.
Yeah. And
good.
I was going to say, and that's something that I refuse to do. Like if you just give something away, not everyone is meant to learn all these skill sets. As I mentioned, some people put up giant red flags, and some people aren't prepared mentally for the consequences of learning these actions, which within the first day of training and people getting exposed to vital targets on the body, I mean, if you're not careful as an instructor, a lot of people can end up hurt.
Sure.
And I don't want that on my conscience. I won't open up that liability to myself or to the family that taught me. And again, if someone has been vetted, if I understand that they're willing to respect me and respect the system, then I'll teach them. But like I said, we don't want to be that martial arts school with the free belt and the free gi.
And you need to have people need to start at the very beginning and really understanding the foundational principles about things before you can jump up to that intermediate or expert level of knowledge and practice. And a lot of people want those shortcuts in life. And especially with a lot of martial arts, it takes that time and dedication to really know it and have that be something you're breathing in and out of every single day. And I guess that was another question
of shooting seminars, right?
Oh, yeah.
I've trained with some guys who I now call friends, right? And I've trained with them multiple times. And I realized that just by me training next to someone who's a cool dude, right? SF community or pro shooter competition level, that doesn't make me a pro shooter or an SF dude just because I have a photo next to them.
Right.
I think it's a shame when people assume that suddenly they're elevated to a new status because they've taken one class, right? Like you can't go to a 4-hour seminar and become a black belt.
Right.
And you can't apply that black belt mentality to a one-day survival class or to, shooting skills or whatever it may be. You really got to put in the time, the dirt time in the survival world, the mat time in the martial arts world to really be able to stand on your own merit. In SIOC is a merit-based system. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a merit-based system. I haven't rolled in a while, and I know some of my submissions are probably at like a 1 or 2 stripe blue belt level. But I know that some, it's like, holy crap, he's got a purple belt level, this or that. Like, you got to maintain it. It's kind of like if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Well, that's true. And the same is true of survival skills, self-defense skills, what have you.
Sure, you can atrophy with all those things, mentally, physically, all of it. Yep. Well, what other are those the two main martial arts that you've studied? Are there other ones? And when did you first get in? Was SIOC the first kind of introduction, or did you have a background earlier on in your life in
Man,
martial arts?
When I was a little baby, right, like little preteen, I was in Kenpo karate, right, Ed Parker Kenpo karate, and I was a brown belt in that. And then I hit like preteen puberty, and I was like, oh, girls, and whatever, and I stopped, and I always regretted that, right? I always regretted never going through and finishing up to the black belt. And then over the years, Taekwondo I messed around with a little bit in college, but then in my mid 20s, I was like, I want to get back into martial arts. I want it, and I kind of made good on that promise to myself, like I will get a black belt. So I found a local school, and that local school was a SIOC school. It was in Bristol, Connecticut, Raisu Martial Arts, and they had an applied self-defense program, which was a combination of Western boxing, Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's philosophy, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, along with Filipino martial arts. And there was a belt system in that school, and it took me roughly 4.5 years to get a black belt in that applied self-defense curriculum. But along the way, I was also becoming a SIOC instructor as an apprentice instructor, and then eventually like a low-level associate, and eventually the high-level associate that I am now. So I have done multiple martial arts. I love the striking arts. I love the grappling arts. Obviously, you can count firearms as a martial art. So I went to SIG Academy. I mean, geez, I don't know how many times I did the whole curriculum for the long range and carbine and pistol course up there, shotgun courses. I mean, I love training. And there are guys like me out there that are probably listening. They're like, he's a training junkie, just like me, and you got to tell your wife or you got to tell your girlfriend, like, no, I can't go. I'm going to get my ass handed to me, and it's going to be wonderful. And, it becomes part of your lifestyle to seek out training, to want to learn from others. And like I said, if you think about why people do it, it's because you don't want to kill people. You don't want to hurt people. You do it because you love your life. You love protecting the lives of people around you. And that's really how I see my training now. It's like, I don't do things to be, Frank Castle. And by the way, I do not have a single Punisher skull anywhere in my car or house or anything like that. I'm not trying to be Frank Castle, but, I do want to be able to protect, the girl I'm dating, or, my nieces, or my dad, because he's, 84 years old now. So I would feel terrible as a man if I had the opportunity to train and become a strong version of myself, and I chose not to. At that point, I'd say I'm not much of a man at all.
It's a really good point. There's so many things that I feel like, I even saw a post recently that you had where about like, there's a train that derailed and had, these horrible poisonous fumes that were going out, and they had to be able to they're telling people, you got to evacuate now. What you're breathing in could kill you or cause cancer. Like, and it's something that people don't even think that train right down the road could happen. Or, we see in Syria and Turkey, okay, we have this, horrible set of earthquakes, and there's 5,000 dead, and there's homes that are ruined. There's water, there's electricity, there's things that are out that people don't. I mean, there are a lot of folks who do prepare for it. Like you said, there's these lifelong learners and trainers, but I think in the masses, that's something that it's a skill sets, plural, that are not necessarily focused on a whole. Those aren't things that are taught in public educational systems. There's not something that it's easily digestible, and there's censorship that comes from even trying to teach these types of survival techniques and skills and learning. And I kind of wanted to bring this back around to asking you about those levels of censorship that you have received personally from trying to share and, elaborate on these skills and the necessities of them, of what we're talking about, and how you see that in your day-to-day life, as far as, it seems like there's folks actively trying to not let you use your platforms to be able to spread this exact message that we're talking about today.
Right. And I think everyone has felt this at some point when they share information about COVID, right? I mean, you post on COVID and you'll see this was not verified by COVID fact checkers. Well, there's no such thing as a fact checker. It's an opinion checker. And that was already proven with Elon Musk. Shout out to you, buddy. Yeah. At Fieldcraft, we've been censored. At one point, when I first joined the company, one of the banks froze about $80,000 on one of the Fieldcraft accounts and said, you can't have it back for about 90 days. Now, listen, the company has done really well and we've spread out funds here and there, but 80 grand not being able to access that for 90 days is substantial for anyone.
Yeah.
And especially when we're onboarding new people and we're paying for flights for instructors to come in and things like that. There's no doubt that censorship happens on multiple levels. We've had people tell us with various training facilities, like, oh, you guys are associated with guns? No. And they were fine with land nav, they're fine with medical training, but they don't want anything to do with guns. We've had people on social media personally, I mentioned this at the very beginning, I was just in San Antonio last week and I had Instagram tell me that my post about 34,000 people without having power, goes against the standards of the community. I'm like, what standard is that? Where I'm telling people, hey, you might want to check on your friends in San Antonio, or hey, you might want to. Yeah. And I'm the person in the company meeting who brings up facts and everyone's like, oh, he's being insensitive. I'm like, no, it's the truth. You might not like the delivery, but the message is going to be the same, whether, I say it or, I put it in a text message.
Right.
And then recently, like I had my link tree shut down. It said, you cannot have links to pornography, which I'm like, really? I'm sharing pornography? How come I'm not getting any money from that? Because I don't have any pornography on there. You cannot have links to firearm sales. I'm like, I'm not selling any guns. Like, I don't have an FFL. You cannot have, let's see, pornography, guns. There are like 3 other categories. I'm like, what the hell am I promoting? Like, yeah, I do have a custom wool vest. I do have, connections with like a company that makes, fire starters and a handful of things. I'm like, it's not pornography, it's not guns, and it's not whatever else was out there. Hate speech. I was like, what hate speech is out there? I had a link to my charity fund in my hometown that sends underprivileged kids to summer camps, and I got shut down. I'll tell you, man, the censorship thing is hilarious to me. It's funny, but it's not funny because, it's getting to the point now where mainstream America is starting to realize how ridiculous the censors are and who's getting censored and who's getting shut out. I think COVID's, what did Governor Ron DeSantis say? He called it COVID theater. I think COVID theater, people are realizing, okay, initially we were all scared out of our minds. I thought COVID was going to result in like bleeding from the eyes and the asshole, and it didn't happen. And I'm kind of disappointed because it was a weak pandemic. And yeah, I know people get sick, but people get sick from the flu every single year, and the mortality rates are relatively the same. And every single year the pandemic is going to shift. But people are realizing, all right, stop social distancing. Stop wearing the masks. You don't need them. They're not effective in the first place. It's just getting so ridiculous. And from a public education standpoint, we know that kids were not served during COVID. The distance learning did not work. I think people are realizing that they're being lied to, that they're being led astray, that all this censorship is maybe what you want to pay attention to as opposed to agree with the censors. Like, oh, they're bad people. No, maybe they're the ones you should be listening to because they're the ones that might have the answers when other people are trying to deceive you, So it's been a wild ride, and we're still on that ride. I feel like the roller coaster doesn't have brakes at this point, and we don't know when this ride's going to be over.
Good points, man. I mean, it's it's a sad day when some of the skill sets that you're teaching about surviving certain things, whether it's natural disasters or man-made, that those things are being censored. It's almost like you're trying to take the power away from the people and be like, no, we'll serve you. We'll protect you. Listen to us. We have all the solutions. And really, when it comes down to it, we need to individually have all these skill sets. We need to be able to have these things that we learn and then we can promote and we can share within our communities. Because when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I'm defending my family. If they're behind me, it's me. What do they say? Like, it takes 6 minutes for a cop to arrive. Well, there's a lot that can happen in that 6 minutes, and you need to be able to be prepared for whatever it is. If I see something that doesn't seem right around me, there's some folks who kind of send off a red flag, I'm acting. I'd rather be, overprotective than be, having to have an undertaker, deal with me. And I think that those kinds of censorships that you're talking about, it's just baffling to me. And I understand that there are some, people in the world that maybe they need to be a part of that cancel culture idea, but for the most part, someone who like you is teaching these valuable skills. I don't understand it. They don't have a leg to stand on these platforms. And that kind of,
I could go off on cancel culture. I don't know if I should.
We can leave that for another discussion. I do want to talk about there was a post that you had that I thought was very powerful. And, you had to repost it again. And we kind of talked about this at the very beginning about you with having the United States flag and talking about your family and what that meant to you and where from the Polish side and from the Philippines and, how the U.S., really kind of helped both of those communities in times where there was some serious dire straits going on.
Yeah, so this was September of 2020, so election cycle year, and I had a photo of me. I'm down on the Connecticut coastline. I've got the beautiful red, white, and blue waving behind me. I'm smiling, and I was just so proud in that moment. I wrote a post. I was like, "Hey, I'm half Polish. I'm half Filipino. The stubbornness is totally my Polish side, right? The resourcefulness is definitely my Filipino side. My father came to this country as an immigrant. Let's not forget that. My great grandfather, came into New York and then, drove down to Connecticut. My grandmother was super resilient. She was 98 years old when she died, and she was living on her own up until then. And I was just extolling the virtues of my patriotism, and that post got flagged and it got taken down. And I was like, what the hell? So I put it back up again. I'm like, seriously, this is ridiculous. It said this goes against my Instagram community standards again. And I'm like, really? For saying that, I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud, to love this country. When people say, what are you? I say, I'm American, right? I'm half Filipino. I'm half Polish. I'm technically biracial, but I'm 100% American. For whatever reason, they did not like that. And that got taken down. And then it was put back up. And I was like, Jesus, this is a sad world that we live in where this type of thing is happening. And I get it. There are people out there that maybe aren't as stubborn or as resilient. And maybe that turned them off completely from that social media channel. And now what? A voice is silenced, right? That goes against our First Amendment. You know what I mean? Like, you have the freedom of speech.
It's the most un-American thing.
Yep. To be censored, to be intimidated on a platform that you're supposed to be sharing. No one should be intimidated to talk about their background, and I knew I wasn't going to talk about cancel culture, but I'm going to go there for a little bit. This whole idea of removing statues and whatnot, it's history. It's in the past. This whole idea of, we can't, use the product from this company because they've got a history of this. What are they doing right now? Are they employing people of multiple backgrounds? I bet they're employing someone that's just like you. I don't care if cancel culture comes from the right or from the left. Usually it doesn't affect the person at the top, the person that you're probably wanting to affect. It's affecting the 600 workers who are doing the groundwork, getting whatever products out to the shelves. For a while, I was very anti this company, anti that company. And I said, what, is it really helping? And granted, I try to help out local businesses as much as possible. But if I'm traveling many to resupply, there are certain stores that I will have to go into to get certain items. And granted, they may not be the most American company by some standards. They're still feeding Americans. And I'm not going to be a child and say that, my $20 purchase of coffee and cheesecake is going to, really impact something. And I know there are going to be people that are gonna be like, oh, he's a sellout. I don't care. I'm going to do what I have to do and look at it that way.
Oh, those are good points, man. I mean, though it is, those are the people that you have a company that's in America. You got your local, you got your communities that are being built around that. There's someone who requires that paycheck in order to feed
Mm-hmm.
their family. And
Yeah.
that's taken away so many times. You don't think about how that's happening. Oh, the CEO is evil. Well, that could be so, but he's still, he's still collecting his checks. But the people who don't collect their checks and need to use that to feed their family, that's really where the real effect is.
Yeah, what we should really do is just try to get we should try to get the flight list from Epstein, and that CEO is probably on that flight list, being a pedophile or something. So we should get after him that way.
It's crazy, man. We're just living in some wild times, and every single year it just what they is this a simulation? What is happening? Because some things just don't make sense at all to me. And those all drive me to want to learn those more skill sets of like living off the land, foraging, being, I'm a big hunter, being able to provide my own food and knowing where it comes from. And I guess that's something too that I was going to ask you about. With all these skill sets you talk about, is like foraging something that you actively do? Are you actively hunting? What are you doing as far, in gardening? Are you doing some of these things in kind of your own self-reliant ways, as well as teaching these skills for those folks to be able to do that as well?
Yes, I am not a phony when it comes to hunting, fishing, and foraging. I don't have a garden yet. But I will be out here. I mean, North Carolina's got beautiful weather.
Oh, yeah.
It has been below freezing lately, so I'm not planting. But I'm always looking to expand the skill set. I've been fishing since I was a little kid. I've been bird hunting since I was 14 or so, and deer hunting. And I have been overseas to Africa to hunt over there, and I've been hunting up in Alaska and Wyoming, and I should have been hunting in Texas last week, but there was a giant freeze there, and all the black buck and axis deer that we were going to go after died in that freeze.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy practicing what I preach, and there are a lot of phonies out there that will say that they do X, Y, and Z, and they do the Bear Grylls thing. They spend a night in the hotel instead of out in the field. So I love getting my hands dirty. I love showing people how to clean fish. Lately, my passion, it's not just the deer hunting. I actually enjoy the butchering more than anything else, where
Yes.
I can show people like, look, this is how I clean the silver skin off the backstrap. Watch this. And when they see all that silver skin come off at once, they're like, wow, there's not a bunch of jagged cuts on that loin. I'm like, yeah, this is how you do it. And that to me is more fascinating now than pressing the trigger. I'll tell you, I don't get me wrong. I love the hunt. I love the long range shooting that I do. I love all the true field craft, but I also love the integration of those skill sets to the everyday. Like I've got venison right now in my refrigerator that's thawing out. That's been in my freezer since November. I try to do as much as I can to put wild meat in my freezer as much as there's store bought.
Sure.
It's just more satisfying. And the foraging thing, Marty Simon was the foremost plants expert in the country. Him and George Hedgepeth, Christopher Nierges. These are three guys that I highly respect. We have a great edible plants instructor here. Her name is Kate Smith. She's a total badass. She could probably deadlift both the two of us and maybe three listeners. Kate is a beast. Kate's awesome. So you can always learn something new fishing, hunting. You can always learn something new foraging wise. I'm excited to really exploit the Atlantic and go do some deep sea fishing because it's only a couple hours away, and I want to find a charter. So yeah, it's all part of my life.
What are you planning on doing with that venison that you got defrosting right now? What do you like to cook? What are some of your favorites?
So I've already eaten all my backstrap and my tenderloins. I think I have 2 ball roasts left, but that's a whole bunch of grind. And I do coarse grind and I do a very fine grind. And I was screwing around with something recently where I brown the meat and then I chop up a whole bunch of like jalapenos and onions, and then I do a mixture of heavy cream and sriracha sauce, and it makes an awesome dip. It's out of this world because the heavy cream gives it that creamy. Oh, a heavy cream sriracha, and then like different cheeses,
Right.
and then I have it with like pork rinds. Oh my god, it's one of those things where it's like I know that I put 2 pounds of venison in that pan, and I've eaten about 3/4 of that pan. Like a human being should not be eating that much red meat, but it's good, and there's no, it's not pork fat, and it's not beef red meat. So I'm like, it's natural. Like cavemen did it. Then again, cavemen lived to like 30 at most. Um, so yeah, I'm probably gonna do that. That's a guilty pleasure, doing like a Mexican dip with venison and heavy cream, sriracha, and cheese.
Hey man, you got to fuel for all these courses you're teaching. I mean, this is imperative. So
Yeah, and I also say that like I'm a full size American male. Like I don't wear skinny jeans. I'm the Yukon size. And the funny thing is, like, our instructor is Jerry. He'll say about Mike Glover and me, it's like, you are the two biggest Asians I've ever met. Like I'm 215 pounds. I'm 6 feet tall, and people are like, "You're Asian?" I'm like, probably the Polish side. That's where I'm from. So like, yeah, I'll eat 2 pounds of meat at a sitting. It's the Polish and whatever.
that's awesome. I was going to ask you also about some of the courses. I mean, obviously you have these that you're doing the 1-2 day and longer courses. Are you doing any webinars? For folks I that want to maybe kind of get an intro, kind of a one-on-one, is there something in a webinar before maybe they commit to traveling wherever they are regionally to take one of your courses?
Yeah, we've got a platform that we use called Locals. And Locals has a couple different paid walls, inexpensive subscriptions, like $5 a month. I know Mike has a Patreon account.
Yep.
And on Locals, we have a land navigation course. We have a recording of a survival firearm seminar that I did, and I've done a survival kit seminar on there. And we do have some online training, but I'll tell people online training can only take you so far. I can get more out of you in a weekend than a 12-week program, where I'll see you once a week. If I have you for a weekend, I mean, my 2-day wilderness survival class, I give people 20 hours of instruction, 9 to 5, and then about 7 in the morning. And then at night, it's 6 o'clock until whenever. So, I mean, I will make sure we hit 20 hours of instruction in 2 days. And people are like, holy crap, that was a lot. So we do some stuff online, but it will never replace the in-person training. It's kind of like trying to learn grappling online. You got to have interaction face to face with someone. Some of the things, like I can show someone with tying a knot. It's easier if they're right over my shoulder and I'm like, look at this, and I tie it and they can see it from my perspective. It's not always so easy to do that over the internet.
Yeah.
I tell people training isn't just the information, it's the experience, right? Like I want to train people to smell the campfire, and I want to feel the cold air in the morning. Like it's something that you'll never forget, which you're not going to get sitting, with a ceiling fan,
Right.
blowing on you.
Well, it's true, man. I mean, being able to practice and make a mistake and have someone who knows what they're talking about be like, hey, do this way. And those, like, I remember reading like about your overnight course, like, it's one thing to have like the 1-day course, but if you can go overnight and then you're doing the fire and then you're showing how to, safely put it out and all the different things that are like, because in your book, you talk about a lot of different types of fires you can create. Sometimes you want to have one that's more concealed. Sometimes, and especially in like, you're kind of talking about your grandfather. And I'm sure that there's times where, you're out there in the jungle or you're out someplace, and you're surviving. You don't want everyone to know that you're there, perhaps. And you need to be able to do things in a stealth manner. And it's hard to be able to show those kinds of things online and be like, here's how you do this. But like, man, it nothing beats the instruction in person. So I definitely would point, and suggest folks do that. But I just was curious about that webinar thing for folks who might want to just kind of dip their toes into it and have a little introduction. One thing I wanted to ask about is different types of equipment, and kind of, you talked about your everyday carry and you have everything laid out in the same spot, and it's something that you repetitively do every single day as part of your routine. if we can just kind of maybe start there, and I'll ask a few other questions, but what is it that you have in your everyday? What do you have on you 24/7 when you're out?
Hold on. Let's see. All right. Right front pocket is always a Swiss Army knife and a ferro rod. Okay. Swiss Army knife is the Victorinox Ranger, and it's a 5-layer Swiss Army knife. People say, well, why do you like that one? Because it fits my hand the best. Some people with smaller hands will go a 4-layer. Other people will go with a 3-layer. But I wear an XL glove. I have long fingers, skinny fingers, so I have a big grip radius. That fits my hand the best for prolonged carving. I carry these 2 items every single day without fail. Left front pocket. Chapstick. You got to have kissable lips. Bic lighter with bike inner tube around it. The bike inner tube serves 2 purposes. One, it's a tinder. The other thing is it keeps it from falling out of your pocket. I carry a length of cord with me, and that's for tying things down, and I use it all the time.
About how many feet do you have on that?
So people laugh when I say 6 feet 3 inches, and they're like, why is it that length? I'm like, okay, 100 divided by 2 is 50. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And I go down and I'm like, and eventually when you get to 12.6 divided by 2 is 6.3. So that's that. Always a flashlight. We cannot see in the dark. So without fail, there's always a flashlight. I pulled this out because I was sitting down, and I pulled this out because we were sitting down.
Right.
Back left pocket is a bandana. Consider it a flexible utility tool. Very important to have that. I can use it for taking hot pots off the fire, hobo bundle all my stuff in a hotel room. With a padlock, I can make it into a weapon. Back right-hand pocket is a wallet. I think we all know what those look like. Other strong side is always a fixed blade. In this case, this is my Amtac Minuteman, and Bill Rapier is a very good friend. This one, for you guys who are wondering, is serial number 007. That was a gift. Very, very good friend, Bill. And then it's usually a Glock pistol. And I brought out a couple different ones just in case people are wondering. I am a staunch Glock advocate, and all the guys in SIOC, we all carry either a Glock 19 or a Glock 17. So if I'm training with, say, Tuhan Tom, and I'm like, hey, I only have 1 mag on me, I know that he'll have a Glock 17 mag on him. It's another SIOC thing. People don't realize our levels go that deep. So I either have my 17 on me, or this is my 48 MOS. And what you want to have on you, especially when I go into the woods, you want to have a weapon light. And I like red dots. It took me a long time to build up the understanding of red dots, but to be able to hit 50-yard shots at will, right, and full-size steel targets, 75 yards, it creates a level of what's called overmatch, the ability to extend your tool further than your opponent can extend theirs. If anyone is training 3 yards, 3 seconds, 3 rounds, well, I'm training 25-yard bullseye B8 shots. How many 10 rings can I hit in a minute? And now with my red dot, I'm shooting 50 yards with a pistol. There's a reason why I love precision long rifle, scoped carbine, and red dot pistol. You can bring the fight to your threat before they can engage you. Really, really amazing capability. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Glocks. And then I don't have my bag here. It's over there. But there's a tourniquet, spare mag, extra flashlight, headlamp. You can look online and see all the other gear that I have with me. And that's just the bag that I go to and from work with. Right. And when I fly, the only thing I have to take out of there is just the spare mag. And then when I get to where I'm going, I take it out of my gun case, put everything back in. So I have a pretty good tally of what I have on me every single day. And I check it to make sure that I have batteries in my flashlight, right? I check it to make sure that my Swiss Army knife is sharp. And I've developed that system. And because of that, I feel very confident leaving the house. I can address whatever I need to.
I know that you've talked extensively about, what systems you have in place, and, whether people call it a bug out bag or be ready bag, or, whatever they want to, term it. But you've also taken another step in talking about bug out rigs and being able to outfit your vehicles and to be able to have everything you may need for emergency situations. Can you talk a little bit about that? And is that a course that is offered, quite often? Because that sounds like a phenomenal one to take.
We just ran that course 2 days ago here. We run a course called Go Rigs and Coffee, right? People are probably familiar with the concept of a go bag. You might have it at work, right? Something bad happens, grab your go bag and go, and that might have extra water, spare socks, cash for getting things out of vending machines if you're in an urban area, right? Whatever it takes. If you really want to be the cool guy, Jason Bourne, maybe it has lock picks, maybe it has all sorts of stuff that you probably won't need, but whatever. You're Jason Bourne. I want to be as cool as you. But the Go Rig or the bug out vehicle, it's an extension of what you have in your pockets, an extension of what you carry in your backpack. So you think about it. I carry a Swiss Army knife and I carry a fixed blade on me. Well, in my vehicle, I'm going to have an axe. I'm going to have a full-size saw. Cutting needs, just like I mentioned in the book, it's a concept. I carry a flashlight in my pocket. I carry a headlamp in my backpack. In my vehicle, I have a lot of lighting. It's a concept, illumination. In my pocket, I carry cordage. In my backpack, I carry duct tape and some repair stuff. In my vehicle, I've got tie-down straps. If you think about it, you can apply the concepts of what you put on your person or in your bag to your vehicle. And you can always bring it back to that, right? The clothes that you leave your house with every single day form a shelter. Your vehicle is the ultimate hard shell tent. And you can carry other things in your vehicle that extend your range and your capability. When we teach the Go Rigs, we're not teaching people like, okay, you're going to open up your door and you're going to have ballistic panels staged in there and you're going to barricade yourself here. Like, we're not teaching that. Let's look at when people actually had to use their vehicles to evacuate in the face of a natural disaster, civil unrest. And we're showing people, look, you might want to know multiple ways of egressing from a neighborhood. What is the most possible and probable route someone's going to take? Well, do you know of any fire roads that get you around that people aren't taking? Maybe you want to have a vehicle that can drive off-road just as easily as it can on-road. There are a million questions you can ask. Like, do you let your vehicle get down below a half tank or do you refill it? I always preach the half tank habit.
Yeah.
Do you know what your vehicle? Yeah. Do you know what your vehicle's range is? Do you know if your vehicle can push another vehicle or an obstacle out of the way or drag an obstacle with tow straps to make it difficult for someone to follow you? I mean, granted, a lot of this stuff could be considered, Angelina Jolie Salt character. I guess that's the female version of Jason Bourne. I don't know. But what are you willing to do to protect your life, to save your family's lives, to help the people that you care the most about? I mean, maybe it's not like the greatest urban disaster we've ever seen, but what if you have to go from point A to point B because someone needs something in a storm? Well, could you get to a place that has it, or to a relative's house that has a spare EpiPen or whatever it may be? Like, are you capable of doing that? Is your vehicle capable? So you can use the kit on your body or that you carry as a teaching mechanism to tell you what you should do with your vehicle to properly equip it. And you can use your vehicle, reverse engineer, to tell you, well, what should you carry on your person? Oh, well, I have road flares in my vehicle for signaling. Well, do you have anything that you could signal with? Well, I've got that flashlight. Well, I've got a horn in my vehicle. Maybe you carry a whistle. So
mirror,
you can use,
right?
Yeah, you can definitely use your larger kit to kind of temper your understanding of what your smaller kit should be, and vice versa.
Absolutely. Those are, I mean, we had, a little over 5 years ago when, we had a huge hurricane here hit Houston, and we happened to be in Austin at the time. We came back because our neighborhood, they kind of backflooded it so that they wouldn't flood downtown. So there was a lot of water that was coming up post rain, post most folks flooding. All of a sudden, the neighborhood's in dire straits. And it ended up being that like the water stopped 2 houses away from us, and everybody south of there got up to like, 8 feet in some houses. But as that water was coming up, we knew that we need to get back home. There's some things that we needed to secure, bring back up to us. We have a ranch in Central Texas. And so we had a spot that we could go and put things. And we get on the highway, and my wife and I are trying to head back in. And all of a sudden we see military has shut down the highway. And I end up backing up and going backwards down the on-ramp and going over a bunch of grasslands, and I'm going through spots, and I'm cutting through areas that, it was even dicey with 4-wheel drive, but I was like, I don't know what's about to happen. All I know is that I'm not going to be stuck in this gridlock on a highway where I cannot get off for who knows. I've known folks who had to spend 30 something hours in the exact same spot. I have food. I got some, I've got things that I can, and water and stuff inside my vehicle, just like you were talking about for preparedness. But it wasn't like, I wasn't thinking a long enough strategy in my mind. I didn't have enough, and it taught me a lot, but it taught me then, I already kind of knew it. I will never have a non 4-wheel drive vehicle in Texas because I need that. And that was something that she's like, man, I can't believe you just did that. I'm like, well, we can do it. We have the vehicle to be able to do it. Now that guy over there and that, Nissan Sentra or whatever, he ain't getting over this. He's going to be stuck on this thing forever. But it was after the effect of the flood too. And I don't know why they were shutting it down. I didn't want to stick around to find out. I just wanted to get back to a different route. And I knew different routes. And we've had, I think I might've mentioned it to you too. I have a company called Map My Ranch where we do maps of people's hunting places. I mean, it could be anything really. It's, lakes, whatever. But we had one guy come to me and he said, I work downtown in Houston. We live out here in the suburbs. I have a 22-mile trek. I want to be able to get a map that shows all these ways that I can be able to have a tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 system for getting back home in the state of emergency. And I was like, wow, no one has asked that before. And when I mentioned it, then all of a sudden some other people say, yeah, I want to be able to do that. You need to look at your back road farm systems. You got to figure out, like you said, too, what are your alternate routes, and learn them and know them ahead of time, not just where Houston, the millions of people are going to evacuate out of this route, but how are you going to get around that to where you can maybe get to where you're going safely and quickly and without incident? Because especially in big cities and metropolis areas, you got a lot of people that don't know what to do all at once. And that's a lot of pressure to be around those folks. And, you know it really well. Not everyone acts well under pressure.
Yeah. And tying a few of the concepts together that we've already been talking about, feeder mindset, that feeder mentality, by getting that 4-wheel drive, you're being proactive.
Yep.
Something that Kevin Owens likes saying here in North Carolina is he voted. He voted. When that guy decided to buy that Nissan Sentra or whatever, he voted. He volunteered to put himself into a predicament. He voted. And same thing is true of like someone who decides to carjack your vehicle. They made a decision that they could potentially pay for with their life if they threaten yours. Yep. He voted. So you think about it, all of your preparedness was a decision, and you could have easily said, well, that's not going to happen to me, right? You could easily play that game that so many people are quick to say, like, well, it never happens until it does, right? Which is another expression that we love saying here, like things are okay until they're not, and there's a double standard in the survival community where if I were, say, like the victim of a crime, people would not question why I decided to carry a gun. I've never been the victim of a physical altercation against me, and I still carry a gun. And people are like, oh, you must be paranoid. It's like, Jesus, do I have to become a victim before it's okay for me to do something to protect myself?
Right.
I'm not willing to do that. And your opinion doesn't matter. So, it's just funny what people are willing to say to actually try to convince themselves. Like the decision's simple, right? The logic is simple, but people aren't willing to make the right choices to protect the most valuable thing in their lives, which are the lives that they have and the lives of the people around them.
Absolutely. No, I remember, telling some folks about what I had with me and what I keep in my vehicle, and they were like, you keep that? I'm like, I don't want to ever have to use that, or even like bolt cutters. I don't foresee there's many possibilities that in my routes that, you know what, if there's an area that's closed off and I need to be able to get to it, yeah, I'm gonna have bolt cutters. And it's like, it's one of those things that it may seem silly, but then I've had friends that are like, yeah, I got a little set too to keep in the back of my truck. It's like, you're using that empty space, like for, nothing else is there, put it in there. Just something that you may need.
Or you could be the super secret squirrel guy that has the lock picks. It's like, I won't break the lock. I'm going to pick it. I'm going to go through and close it behind me, because you're trained by the CIA or something.
Yeah. Or you've watched a lot of Jason Bourne movies, picked a few things
right.
up.
Or Salt, right? Angelina Jolie.
We got 2 movies we got to study now. Well, speaking of studying some things, and talking about equipment, there are some incredible knives that you have helped design and put out. I got 2 of them here. One here is the name is it Puku? Is that the correct? And then another one that you have with Montana Knife Company, who I've gotten both of these knives and they're both incredible, but I'd like for you to talk about those. And I know you have another one coming up here too with, I think it's the Winkler knives that you have.
Yeah.
And, maybe there's some other ones that you have too you'd like to talk about. But can you tell me a little bit about what some of these ones are designed for? Maybe we can start with this one here and talk to me about what specifically with the design that you had in mind and what purpose you have with this one. And then we'll jump onto the Montana Knife Company one.
Yeah. So our marketing guy told me, he's like, hey, you're going to design a knife with Stroop knives, right? Chris Stroop. And I was like, all right, I'll do that. And Glover wanted another knife, so I said, I'll design another knife. So I went back and forth with Chris Stroop, and I said, that knife needs to, what I would love to do is I'd love to have a series of knives that are based on traditional designs. And I've traveled to Scandinavia, I've done trips to Norway and to Sweden, and you'll find the Puko all over the place over there. It's a true working knife, and it's characterized by that upswept blade, little to no guard, and what's referred to sometimes as a spud or a bean shaped handle, where it's symmetrical, it's more rounded, it's hand filling as opposed to being like highly textured and designed just for one grip. Okay. So it's designed as a knife that you are going to use for utility, maybe for a lot of carving. And I would say in terms of like knife versus weapon, tool versus weapon, it's probably like 99% tool and 1% weapon. So Stroop designed that knife to have a 1095 steel blade, so very traditional carbon steel blade. His texturing, if you know who made it, you'll see his design influence there. So that one came out. It took like a day to sell all of those, and Stroop was pretty happy, and our marketing guy was pretty happy that the company made some money. Which, by the way, I didn't make a dime off that. I got a free knife, so I'm still waiting for my bonus. Let's see if I get one. Probably not. All right, so now the second knife is that Montana Knife Company knife, and in 2021, Glover was like, "Hey, I want you to meet up with Josh Smith. He's in town." I'm like, "Oh, great! I know Josh." And I mean, keep in mind, I'm a knife nerd. I'm half Filipino, so of course I'm going to like knives. And I used to be a moderator on blade forums, moderator on knife forums. Like, I've been in the knife community for a long, long time. I've reviewed dozens of knives from Knives Illustrated and Recoil. So Josh comes in and he's like, "So tell me about the knives that you like." And I'm like, "Well, I carry this one and that one." And I even showed him, this one from Rapier. And I was like, "Well, I carry this every single day. It's low profile. It's thin. I love the sheath that it comes with, where it's a deep pocket sheath. It uses a discrete carry concept clip, so it's a cloth grabber." I said, "I think we could probably do a series of knives based on, again, historical designs. I'm like, we should do a bird and trout." So that's what that knife was really designed after. Now, does it have the design attributes of a knife that could be used for self-defense? Absolutely. But then again, so does a chef knife, right? A chef's knife, like a little paring knife, has a blade that's long enough to reach targets inside the body, and it's got the right thickness and whatnot. So it has all the attributes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's used for that. I mean, you could use a chef knife for doing damage, or you can use a chef knife for preparing a meal. That knife from Josh Smith could be used for everyday carry needs, some light utility around the camp, processing animals and whatnot. And there were some features that I really wanted. if you look at the very back of the handle, you'll see that there is what's referred to as a jimping on the spine. So the little serrations that are on the top of the spine at the very back, on both sides, and that's just for a secure purchase when you draw it from the sheath. Yes, right there, and on the other side. So Josh did a really, really fantastic job with that. And both of those drops, we're talking hundreds of knives, hundreds and hundreds of the knives. Both of those drops sold out in a collective 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know from previous Montana Knife Company drops, you got to be real quick. You got to practice with your finger. And I've gotten the culinary set, a couple other ones as well, Blackfoot 2.0, and I've used them extensively, and it's one of my favorite knife companies to work with. Had Josh on here for a previous podcast, and that man is just a wealth of knowledge. And I love the design that you guys put together, and a lot of collaboration went into this, a lot of thought. I think it's phenomenal. I can't suggest
design number 2.
Yeah. Can you spill any beans about this one? Is this none? Just anticipation.
Yeah. So Josh and I were talking about design number 2. And when we sat down at the drawing board, I said, we have the everyday carry knife. Now we need a knife that looks like it's going to pay an homage to like the roots of Fieldcraft, right? Like Fieldcraft is a military company, right? It was founded by military guys. So I was like, we need a knife that's characteristic of a military knife. And I always think K-bar, right? So about a 6.5 inch, 7-inch blade. But I'm like, man, K-bar is great, but it was a Marine knife originally. And the founders of the company weren't Marines. I'm like, we need a knife that kind of crosses over service branches. And the knife that always appealed to me was the Randall Knives Model 14, which has more of a clip point instead of a radiused clip. It was a straight clip. So that knife is going to be more of a field knife, about a 7-inch blade, clip point, same style handle. When you look at it, it's going to have a self guard. It will be more of a field knife, like a camp knife, where you're going to be able to do a little bit of everything with it. In the tradition of like a Model 14 Randall.
Wow. When is that? Is there a definitive date of when that may be coming out, or kind of a loose timeline on that one?
Well, I'm flying out to Montana Knife Company next month. I'll be out there with Josh, and I think we're going to do a little bit about that release then. So if you guys are paying attention to the Fieldcraft site, Montana Knife Company site, you'll see what we have in the works probably next month.
Well, as soon as you get any of those things, I'll be promoting them on my channels and stuff here. Maybe I can get you and Josh, whenever you guys have right before the drop, come out here and just talk about that for a few minutes. We kind of did that with the last culinary, just to kind of, have a little bit of information session, but that'd be really great to show that off to listeners.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned the Winkler knives, and that's coming up here pretty soon. Can you tell me a little bit more about that one?
Yeah. So again, the connection, like, I've known Dan Winkler since 2014. I showed you the Winkler Tomahawk earlier. Winkler sent me this knife back in 2000. Let's see what this, like 2010, 2011. I was writing for Joel Lambert's website. This is Winkler's knife called the Madumi. Also designed by the same guy who designed the Tomahawk. Has similar handle structure and whatnot. So I've known Dan Winkler through the SIOC organization for many years, right? Almost a decade. And before I joined Fieldcraft, this was in the summer of 2019, maybe 2020. I said, hey, Dan, would you ever want to do a collaboration with me? And he knew of me through the articles I've written and my work as a survival instructor and just a SIOC guy. He goes, yes. So I sketched up a knife, and I wanted this knife to be Winkler's version, my version of a Loveless style knife that also was very reminiscent of the knife that I carried working at the Wilderness Learning Center. So the knife that we came up with, this is a G10 model of it. The knife that we came up with is this one. And you can see, like, through the handle, it's going to be skeletonized there. So the balance is going to be very neutral. It'll be, dead center of the handle. The blade is a drop point blade, which, if you look at this blade and you look at the knife that I carried as a survival instructor with the Wilderness Learning Center, almost identical. People always poo-poo and they say, like, oh, it doesn't have a guard. I'm like, I'll put the tiniest little guard on there just to make people that need training wheels feel better. most knives, if you use them correctly, you're not going to ride the blade, which not sharp. Riding the blade is that.
Right.
If you have a good grasp on your handle, and if the handle's shaped correctly, you're not riding the blade. But listen, everyone today is a flesh cutter. Everyone is Jason Bourne again, So born again, Jason Bourne again.
There's a T-shirt there, I think.
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, maybe it'll be out of Utah or something. So in any case, this knife has like the Winkler. It's got the, let's see, is it up here? No, it's not here. It has like the Winkler notching that you're going to see in some of his other knives. When people see it, they're going to be like, damn, that's a Winkler knife. But they're also going to say, that's a knife that doesn't look like anything else in his catalog. And when they put the pieces together and they follow the dots, they're going to say, makes sense why he designed it that way. So I'm planning on I'm gonna call this the general purpose, or the GP, which is a kind of a head nod to like military, since Marty was an Army guy and he always talked about like general purpose this or whatever. We're gonna call it the GP, or the general purpose. That's like a 90% solution for a name, because they already have a knife called the General. If I need to come up with a different name, I'll come up with something. As far as the sheath is going to be like one of Winkler's other knife sheaths. It's going to look like this one, but smaller. But I'm also going to ask a friend of mine who has a business not far from San Antonio to make a leather sheath that I designed. I actually made the prototype. So I learned how to do leather work from Marty, and I figure might as well make this entirely my design, right? Like my knife, my sheath. It'll come with a functional sheath from Winkler, but if you want to carry it in the deep pouch style, I'll have a place where you can get that, and it will support a small business in Texas. So
that's great. Can you talk about that idea of why people might want to have a deep sheath such as that? And kind of, because I mean, some folks, I know at the Montana Knife Company, there's a utilitarian aspect of why you can be able to pivot so that if you have this in your, if you have this, tucked away and you're moving, it's not going to be fixed and it won't jab into you and it kind of works with you. But, a lot of folks may not understand the difference in those, if you can kind of point those out.
Yeah. So, when people train bladed arts, many times it's like, all right, let's go get our training knives from the side of the gym. Let's put them in our hand. Okay, go. And that's not how things usually take place, right?
It's not how it starts. Hey, hold on. Let me go get this. Right.
Yeah, like you have to have your blades on you. Now, if you're talking about like bushcraft survival, we're talking about you can't lose the knife. You're going to want to have a handle that is as covered as possible, a deep carry style, where you can even put a piece of cord through the top of the lanyard and then run it through your belt. And now you have dual retention. So the trade-off with a knife that has a lot of retention is that it's not quick to get out of the sheath. There's no way around it. If you can only get 2 fingers on a knife and you got to pull it up and then establish a master grip, it's not as fast as a knife where the majority of the handle is exposed and accessing that blade is fast. The drawback is that because it's so quick to access, it's also easier to get out of the sheath, which means there's a higher likelihood you could lose it if you were in a scenario that would, say, prompt a survival scenario, right? Like car accident or whatever. So there's always a trade-off with your gear. And if you think about it, like you can easily carry a pistol inside of a pistol rug that zips and it's secure. You can also put that pistol outside in an outside the waist belt holster and it's secure. One of them will be more secure. One of them will be faster to draw. So you have to understand the limitations of your gear and recognize how you're going to get those tools in your hands, how you can go from the status of, hey, I'm empty hand, to let me draw my blade, let me draw my pistol or whatever. And that's the type of fight math that I really enjoy teaching. But it's not just fight math, it's survival math, right? Like if I need a blade right now, do I want to have to worry about taking the folding knife out of my pocket, opening it, and then using it? Or do I just want to access the fixed blade and start cutting? If I can cut down my response time, it's going to improve my chances of survival.
Yeah. No, those are very, very important points there. I like your idea that the math time there too. No, it's a great way to look at that. aside from these knife collaborations, are there some other products that you've helped to design or that you have in the works?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier in the podcast that I designed a survival vest with Sleeping Indian wool. It's an all-American company, and I wanted to have a vest that I could wear when I went to Alaska, wear inside of a bush plane. I could wear while I'm driving, where if I ever had to leave my vehicle or flee the vehicle for whatever reason, I'd have survival kit items on me. So that vest, I can tell you, I've got one in the hands of a gun sight instructor. He loves it. I'm wearing mine regularly. I've got them all over the country, and people are pretty happy with it. And it's just carrying capacity on top of a wool vest. So in the same way that you can fill up a vest, like a survival vest for a pilot, there's no reason why you can't have one already filled. And if you have to leave your car, you can throw it on and walk to safety, right?
Right.
So I've got that. This is my original knife sheath that I said I carry with my Swiss Army knife and my ferro rod. The commercial version of these, based on this design, are sold through Yellow Birch Outfitters. It's called the Estela Daily Duo. This came out about a year ago, and I know he's made over 100 of them so far. So it's a popular design for kind of a niche product, and it holds a Swiss Army knife and a ferro rod, so you're always with those two tools. I'm going to have a number of other things coming out. BP Tactical, that makes my favorite holsters in the world. They are making a survival pistol holster based on my specs. And the carry method is one that isn't very common, but it makes sense for a survival pistol. And when you see it, you're going to be like, I need one. So that'll work for the Ruger Mark II and the Browning Buck Mark. And, people will say, oh, it's a 22 is not a survival pistol. There have been more animals killed anywhere on this planet with a 22 than anything else, including people. And all you got to do is ask the Mossad and ask the British SAS if they've ever shot anyone with a 22. And I'm pretty sure they have. So that is going to be coming out. I've got a few other projects, some things I've got in the works with Exotac this year that people, when they see it, they're going to be like, why didn't I think of that? But honestly, it's coming out of the lab. It's coming out of training. When people say, oh, well, what do you use to do this? I use this. And then, well, how do you do this? I use this. Well, oh, I wish we had. I'm like, yeah, I wish we had that too. And then that's when I come up with a design. So a lot of the designs that are out there, they're not fluff, they're functional, and they're born of a need that people have.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, right? You find these things that, you've learned throughout your travels and your times and your classes of what works, what doesn't, what needs to be improved upon. And, the things that you've designed here, these knives and your survival vest and things that you're talking about there, they are products that need to exist. And you have found a great, ability to bring those out into the world. And I know these two knives are incredible. I can't wait to see, the Winkler and different things there too. And I'm going to look up the vest and check that out as well. And I highly suggest other people do as well. Speaking of that, where are the best places for people to be able to follow you, to be able to look at, find these resources? Is there kind of a collective website that you have aside from your socials? And let's go ahead and just tell all the folks where they can find all these things real quick.
Okay. So if people want to find me, they can go to my Linktree, which is Linktree/Kevin Estela. Go to fieldcraftsurvival.com. And when you go to Fieldcraft Survival, just go to About, and it will say Kevin Estela, have my email. Instagram is Estela Wild Ed, short for Estela Wilderness Education, my old company. You guys can email me if you ever have any questions, Estela@fieldcraftsurvival.com. Find me around the campfire. I'm always teaching. I'm always training. So we're out here in North Carolina. You guys can always swing by too. We're in Aberdeen, 3060A Highway 5 in Aberdeen. We have training year round, pretty much every weekend.
What is that like when you're walking in? You step through the doors. What are you seeing? I mean, obviously it's the headquarters there on the East Coast, but what is that your spot there? What are people going to see?
Yeah, you'll probably be greeted by Kevin and Tula's dog Vinny, who is the real star of the show.
Of course,
everyone thinks that these online personalities that we have are the cool people at the company. We're all losers. Vinny is
no match to a dog, right?
Yeah, Vinny gets all the belly rubs. So yeah, you'll probably meet Vinny at the door. We have a small gift shop. It's nowhere near as large as the retail shop that we have out in Utah, but you can find some t-shirts and tourniquet holders and my survival book, things like that. We do have a classroom area. We've got all sorts of stuff that aids us in teaching the courses. It's a smaller facility than we have in Utah, but it's a very capable one. We do our med courses there, some of our long range stuff or survival stuff, a bunch of our workshops. And, then we have a bunch of offices, which just have our personal belongings and junk that we don't want out for the public to see.
And dog food for the dog.
yeah. And the Frisbee, Vinny always plays Frisbee.
Nice. That's an important thing. Before we kind of sign off, I'd like for you to also address one other question I had and that is something I've been asking most of my guests these days is, what is it that you want your overall legacy to be? What is it that you want to leave behind? How do you want to be remembered? And, if you can just expand on those ideas and kind of talk about that and what that means to you.
Here's a question for the audience. Something I used to tell my students or ask my students at the high school was, if you could only have 3 titles listed on your gravestone, what would it be? Right. And now, do you want it to be your occupation? Do you want it to be your relationship with your family? Do you want it to be something that you've accomplished? Right. Do you want to be known as explorer? Do you want to be known as father, son? Do you want to be known as teacher? Maybe it's religious. Maybe you want to say that you're Christian. It's not just the 3 words that you want on your gravestone, but it's also the order. Which is the first one that you want to be known as, the most important, and then the second and the third. And if you do not remember your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary identities in the correct order, it will leave you to a terrible life. So my overall legacy, it's tricky, right? Because so much of my life, I've been an educator, right? I've been a canoeing and kayaking instructor, swimming instructor, survival instructor, high school history teacher. There's no doubt that educator belongs on that. But, one day I want to have a family. One day I want to have kids of my own, and I want to be able to say I'm a father. But I also don't want to forget that I'm a son, right? My mother passed this past summer. My dad is 84. I still love hanging out with my dad. I call him every single day. But I'm also an uncle. So is it family man? Is that the word? I'm religious, right? I'm Catholic. I go to church. I pray. Which is the word that I want to remember? I don't know which words people will call me, but I know in my heart what I want it to be. So we'll see. But I think, without a doubt, if some stranger were to look at the sum total of my life, they would have to say educator there. So what is my legacy? I want to make people better, whether it's smarter, stronger, more secure. I want to make people better than they were before they met me. And maybe that's my way of making the world a better place, leaving it better than I found it.
It sounds like an echo that rips through eternity, just leaving something better behind and kind of having that type of effect. And I know all the skill sets that you teach, the type of mentality you talk about, and are all very, very powerful things. And I know that, you've touched a lot of lives and you will continue to. And I want to just thank you for taking the time to come on to the podcast and talk to the audience here. And, we're definitely going to have all the links to everything and have people be able to follow along your journey, man. And thanks again for sharing all that you do and for being that educator and for being that person who brings more light into this world. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to reach your platform. And I apologize for butt hurting all the Jason Bourne fans out there.
Apologies are accepted on behalf of everyone.
Okay.
Well, thanks again, man, and look forward to having you again sometime on the podcast.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Take care.